And thank you to everyone attending virtually, the camera, and for those watching the recording. Your continued support of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center and programs like Sundays with Survivors and 2G Tuesdays means the world to me. Thank you to everyone at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, the staff, board members, volunteers, and docents, many of who are here, and hopefully you'll have a chance to meet. And a very special thank you to all of our survivors, especially Rosette, Priever, Fishman, Gerbosi, who will be sharing her testimony with us today. It feels so wonderful to be here in person at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center in the presence of Rosette and with all of you. And I'm grateful that we were able to offer this virtual option as well for our friends of the program and HMTC near and far who can be with us in person. My name is Michael Mantell. I'm a psychotherapist, educator, 3G, a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and a volunteer at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. Welcome to Sundays with Survivors. Right here in New York City, where Jews make up only 18% of residents, 60% of all reported hate crimes were motivated by anti-Semitism. And our great city saw a 125% increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes last month. Jew hatred, also known as anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, starts with an idea, but usually it doesn't end there. The Holocaust didn't start with cattle cars, concentration camps, and gas chambers. It started with ideas, with words. With the rise of anti-Semitism, I found myself feeling trapped in conversations with people who consciously or unconsciously hate Jews. One example is when I was sharing resources during Holocaust Remembrance Day with a group of mental health professionals and students. And the conversation quickly devolved into attack on Jews, including the accusation that Jews use the Holocaust narrative to oppress, silence, and kill others. All of my time, attention, and energy was dedicated to people who hate Jews. After trying the same things over and over and over again and expecting different results, I had an idea. I decidedly shifted my energy to educational programs for Jews and our allies. In addition to teaching modern Jewish history, building your family's tree, and other classes in a New York City Hebrew school, in 2020, I started this program, Sundays with Survivors. It began as an idea, then became words exchanged in an email and phone calls with Andrea Bolender, who made me feel like mishpacha. I was a part of the HMTC family before I set foot in the door. So thank you. The first Sundays with Survivors was a private event for family and friends. It was so impactful that we added on another event and another event and another. We opened it to the public and it has been going strong for over 2 years now. In 2021, following the success of Sundays with Survivors, we added a new program called 2G Tuesdays, which provides children of Holocaust survivors the opportunity to share their parents' and families' testimonies with all of us. Sundays with Survivors and 2G Tuesdays became my personal Hanukkah story, my dedication or rededication. After focusing solely on putting out the flames of anti-Semitism, which spread like wildfire, and intentionally take our focus away from our own personal and collective growth and development, both spiritually and otherwise, I turned my attention to rekindling that light, that spark of Jewish pride and education, and looked for ways to fuel that light in me and others that can burn brightly. The Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, these events, the amazing survivors, their families, and the wonderful people I've met throughout who are supporting the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center in these programs give the program life and give me life and give purpose. Since starting Sundays with Survivors and 2G Tuesdays, I've spent weekends here helping to cover shifts to keep the museum open when staff are sick or on vacation. When folks ask me, how was your weekend? What did you do? And I say, I was at the Holocaust Museum. They respond, oh man, I'm so sorry. That sounds so boring. And I feel the complete opposite. I feel such great pride and honor to give back to such an incredible organization and cause that does such important work. And I'm literally here to keep the doors open. And in return, I get so much more. I meet incredible survivors and actually get to speak with them. And individuals who come through the doors, I get to meet them as well and know about them. I also connect with my family who are no longer here, including my grandmother, Alice Diamond, Holocaust survivor from Satmar, Romania, and my grandfather, Mordechai Mendelovich, a Holocaust survivor from Siget, Romania, who I'm named after. And if you know Ashkenazi Jewish tradition, being named after someone means you've never met them, they passed before you were born. However, it's up to me and you and you and you to make sure that their stories and their lives are preserved, and that's why we're here today. Since our last meeting in November, we have unfortunately lost another survivor who shared her testimony with us on Sundays with Survivors, Anita Weisbord. Her passing and the passing of other survivors is a painful reminder of why this program is so important and why I'm so grateful that you're all here to bear witness to Rosette's testimony today. Rosette will be sharing her story of her pre-war life in France, being sent into hiding by her parents, and her life after the war. In a moment, she will be introduced by her son and vice chairman of the board, Rob Fishman. And at the end of the program, we invite you to ask questions during our Q&A portion. And if you're tuning in virtually, you can write them in, and either myself or Rob will ask those for you. Additionally, just another moment, I know that many people made donations when they signed up for this program, so I want to thank you for sponsoring or supporting this incredible organization. And to learn more about the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, visit hmtcli.org if you're viewing virtually, and please make sure you come back to check out the museum and the Children's Memorial Garden here in Glen Cove, Long Island in New York. So again, thank you all for being here, and with that, I turn it over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Michael. So good morning, everybody. As Michael says, I'm Rob Fishman. I'm the vice chairman of the board here, and really want to welcome everybody here. First, I want to really acknowledge some incredible people that have made this happen. And I'm going to ask the staff of HMTC to please rise, because you guys are rock stars. Thank you. Thank you. Also, we're blessed today this morning because we have several docents and educators who are just tireless efforts in the work we do here, and it's because of them that we're able to be here today and learn more about the horrible lessons. So with that, I'm going to be addressing them at the end because we are going to do some tours here. Actually, you know what? Docents, educators, please stand up. We also have many board members here today also that are HMTC board members. I'd ask you to please stand up, board members. Thank you. And I want to give a special shout out to my good friend Andrew Hazen, who is the CEO of Bagel Boss, who was very generous in providing your nosh this morning. Andrew. So first and foremost, since October, as Michael said, a lot of the facts he gave you, so I'm going to speed up just a little bit to get my mom, because that's why you're all here this morning. But we've seen a 61% rise in anti-Semitism, and it's including harassment, vandalism, violence directed against Jews. We've seen high-profile entertainers, athletes openly spouting anti-Semitic tropes, but it's not just about the Jewish community. It's also an upswing against the Black, Asian, and LGBTQ communities as well. So according to the Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitism may be unique in many ways, but like other forms of hate, it grows in silence and blossoms in acquiescence. It is our collective responsibility to recognize the patterns of hate-based prejudice and how this mindset takes root, even more so how it operates in today's world. Our mission here at HMTC is to continue our mission of providing education to students of all ages. Another recent poll found that 50% of young people ages 10 to 17 reported exposure to white supremacist ideologies this year in online multiplayer gaming. So the bottom line, our work here is to fight the good fight against misinformation, which is now rampant across social media, as Michael said before. Another significant goal here is to embrace technology with artificial intelligence, which will connect our present survivors with students of the future. Imagine, for example, a middle school child can actually walk up to a screen and ask a question of a survivor in 20 years from today. We know there'll be a day where there is no longer the opportunity to hear direct testimony. Our primary focus now is to preserve their message, making it available to all future generations. It comes as no surprise that these initiatives, including our school programs, ongoing education for law enforcement, the medical community, transportation of our beloved survivors, and to have this incredibly talented team and staff here at HMTC requires funding to continue. Frankly, we're unable to fulfill our mission without help from the community. We thank you for those who generously donated to HMTC, for those who would like to help us to continue with our programs and technology, including AI. Please see Gail Peck, who's sitting right in the front filming me. She's able to help you, ready to receive your donation, so thank you in advance for that. After my mom speaks, I want to kind of give you a roadmap. Our docents are here, and I've got their names here, which I'll read off to you. And what we're going to be doing is you're going to walk across the hall. Some of you signed up for a tour. The Holocaust Museum is our jewel here, and it is an incredible exhibit for you to see. So what they're going to do, they'll be stationed in one of 6 galleries in the area across on the other side of the hall. If you signed up for a tour, please look for your docent. They're wearing tags. If not, just feel free to find one and ask questions. Just outside, this direction is another one of our jewels here, which is our Children's Memorial Garden. It memorializes the 1.5 million children murdered during the Holocaust and to all children who died during World War II. As you walk the grounds, you'll see an area that contains bricks with inscriptions. It's literally around the building right there. You'll see them. If you're interested in purchasing a brick or more to honor someone in your lives, feel free to speak with our development director, again, Gail Peck. We're almost there, folks. We're going to be having an event here, a couple of things. January 18th, we're doing an event here at HMTC called Fighting Anti-Semitism and Hate Through Education. It is one of our important fundraisers here. And we're also going to have a celebration of Martin Luther King with the Sharon Choir and the Gospel Choir February 5th at the Lake Success Jewish Center. And the proceeds of that event will be to benefit HMTC. So now for the Feature Act. My childhood memories of Mom's childhood was of protection. Because as a teenager, I began to learn more about her life. As you may know, she was a docent at the Southwest Florida Holocaust Museum for more than 20 years. She currently lives, visiting us from Jacksonville, Florida, with her husband, Peter, who's right over there. Her testimony was given to Steven Spielberg in the Shoah Project, for those of you who are familiar with it, in 1997, along with her older brother, Bernard, who was a resistance fighter. So following the presentation, there's going to be a sequence. We have a short video, 7-minute video that we made when we returned to Paris in 2014. She's happy to answer questions. We can do some brief Q&A. And then after that, you're welcome to visit the museum and have a nod. And we really thank you again for being here. So I'd like to bring up Rosette, Priever, Fishman, Gerbosi.
Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be back on Long Island, where we lived for many, many years. We brought up a family. I also say I am very honored to have been asked to give my presentation at this beautiful museum. So I want to say a great hello and welcome to members of the staff, volunteers, board members, friends, guests, and family. As you know, my name is Rosette, Priever, Fishman, Gerbosi. During the Holocaust, I was a child. I was born in Paris, France. My parents, Dora and Shaba Priever, or Seb, he was called Seb, his nickname. And we were young Polish immigrants who came to Paris to seek a better life. My mother was the youngest of 3 girls. They lived very poorly. received no education whatsoever. Only the boys were sent to school. So the girls had to find work at a very young age to help support the family. Since they could not read or write, they had to find some sort of menial work. My mother became a cook for a wealthy family. Her older sister learned dressmaking, went to Paris to apprentice in some very famous couture houses. She actually worked for Coco Chanel and had some wonderful stories to tell about her. And she eventually became quite successful in her trade. She opened up her own shop, sent for my mother, and got her a job as a cook. My father, the youngest of 5 boys, came to Paris with 2 of his brothers. The other 2 emigrated to Chile in South America, where we still have a very extensive Priever family. My 2 uncles in Paris were tailors. My father learned the trade. He and my mother were introduced by a mutual family friend. It was love at first sight, so I heard, and they were married shortly after. My brother Bernard was born the following year. Excuse me, I have to drink some water. My mother helped my father in his fur business, which they started in their small, modest apartment. My father would cut the fur pieces, and she would operate the machine that sewed them together to make fur coats. We no longer wear fur coats, but in those days it was very popular. They worked diligently side by side, even after my brother was born. They were so determined to succeed. 8 years later, my uncle's wife gave birth to a beautiful, identical baby girl. My mother must have been very envious because, lo and behold, I was born 10 months later. From the moment I was born, my mother called me her Mazel dicke Kind. Since Mazel in Yiddish, as we know, a lot of us are Jewish here, her intuition told her that as long as she had me close, no harm would ever come to her, to the family, and that I would bring good fortune to all. She kept telling me that and made me feel so special. Shortly after my birth, they became quite prosperous. My father's business grew tremendously. He was able to acquire a large factory, more help and more machinery. They were able to move into a brand new large apartment and furnished it luxuriously. It was in the Marais section of Paris, in the 4th arrondissement, which was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood at the time. I can still visualize the beautiful, highly polished floors, the oak floor, the dark modern furniture, the newly built bathroom, the paintings. It was all exquisite. There was a clock hanging on the wall of the dining room, my mother's pride and joy. Well, I used to describe, I didn't have the clock in my previous talks, but here it is. It's about 3 feet tall, made of dark, shiny mahogany with a glass front and pendulum. And it chimed every half hour. I still remember pushing my little doll carriage around and around the large dining room table, waiting for the chimes to sound the beautiful melodious tones. I'll tell you more about the clock later. My mother was an immaculate housekeeper. She would not let anyone in the house until they put on special slippers that she kept at the door. She was an elegant woman, always well dressed and made up. I can still smell her beautiful fragrance. A gourmet cook, proficient in both French and Jewish cuisine, she entertained the whole family for all holiday dinners. It was considered a big treat to be invited to Dora's house for dinner. She took her cooking very seriously. For example, one day I came home from school, went into the bathroom and found a large fish swimming in the bathtub. When I asked her why there was a fish in the tub, she replied, "I don't trust a dead fish, and I need to make a filter fish for Passover, and I want to make sure that it's fresh." My father, besides being a very smart businessman, was also a skier, rode a motorcycle, loved the outdoors, and had a fantastic musical talent. He played the piano very beautifully as well as the harmonica. He could not read a note of music. It was strictly by ear. But could he make beautiful music? He entertained us for hours. Well, luckily, my children inherited this wonderful, beautiful talent. They also make beautiful music. They also play beautiful instruments. And my daughter, although she does have a nice singing voice, but inherited a passion for her father, and that is motorcycle. She rides a Harley, a beautiful purple Harley. She was the daredevil of the family. She keeps a picture of her grandfather in her office. He was a true hero to her. I had a charmed life as a little girl in those days. My mother made sure that I had the proper education and polish, which she did not receive, so that by the time I was 9 years old, I was immersed in schoolwork as well as piano, ballet, and even some English lessons, the latter being a symbol of extreme class refinement, according to my mother. My twin cousins and I were very close. I recall my father making us identical fur coats and hats, and my aunt sewing identical dresses for the three of us. We would strut around the park in the neighborhood with people pointing at us and shouting, "Look at the triplets," which was quite a novelty in those days. And we, of course, would laugh to ourselves, but did not deny it. My best friend and schoolmate was named Beth, another Jewish girl. We had a lot in common. We were both studious, quiet, believe it or not, quiet, studious girls who loved to play with our dolls. I remember that she had a large blackboard in her room, and we used to take turns playing teacher and student. And we did our homework together after class. I also had a few Catholic friends who invited me to their communion. I was so impressed by the pageantry and beauty of the Catholic Church, and also how lovely my friends looked in their beautiful white gowns. And I must admit, I was a bit jealous. Our summer vacations were glorious. My parents would send my brother and me to stay with farmers in the countryside for about a month, and then they would join us for another 2 weeks. We always looked forward to their visit, as we had so much fun as a family. One particular summer, I was about 7 or 8 years old. It was the night of my birthday on August 15th. I missed my mother so much that I was crying for her. In the middle of the night, I felt something cool next to my cheek, something that my mother had placed there. When I woke up in the morning, I found the most beautiful porcelain doll I had ever seen, wearing a long blue satin dress, and I loved it for that instant. I immediately declared it to be a boy and named it by my favorite French names, Robert Michel. Well, since my first son, Steve, was named after my father and mother, I named my second boy Robert Michel, or Robert Piper. He often joked about being named after a doll. He knows how much that doll meant to me and what a comfort it was during some very difficult times. In the summer of 1940, just after the Germans marched into Paris, instead of going to a farm, the whole family, including aunts, uncles, and cousins, went to Biarritz for a vacation. It is a seaside resort situated on the Atlantic side, near the border of Spain. This was the first time that I saw Germans and had arrived in trucks. I had heard about these monsters who killed people since my mother's little sister, who had remained in Poland with her husband and 4 children, had written about the terrible situation in Warsaw. My mother sent packages of food and clothing and would receive bail for a while. But when the letters stopped coming, we imagined the worst, and we were right. They were later incarcerated in the Warsaw Ghetto and never heard from again. These German soldiers in the truck were very young, long, blue-eyed, smiling, not at all what I was led to believe. They were handsome and about my brother's age. I turned to my mother and said, they didn't look like monsters to me. She replied, these boys are not the ones to fear. They only follow orders. It's their leaders who are a danger to us. I still could not believe it. At that point, my uncle Jacob, married to my mother's sister, announced that he was not returning to Paris with us. He was petrified of the Germans, being Russians, having served in World War I, and having witnessed some atrocities. He decided to go over the border to Spain and somehow try to reach the United States. He eventually was able to take a ship from Portugal. He told my aunt to return to Paris, close up her business, leave the country as soon as possible, and try to join him. It was still possible to leave at that time. He tried to persuade my father to do the same, but my father kept insisting that the French government would protect his Jews, that we should not be alarmed. In other words, he did not believe that we were in danger. So we returned to Paris. And soon after that, our beautiful serene existence started to crumble. Terrible restrictions were imposed upon the Jews. First, the Jews were not allowed to go out of their houses before 9 in the morning or after dark in the evening. We were not allowed to go to public places such as restaurants, movies, libraries, museums, or assemble in groups. I was deeply affected because I was just started taking ballet lessons at the very famous Châtelet Theater. Like all little girls, I want to become a Priever ballerina. But my dream was to become a Swiss ballerina. However, my mother was informed that Jewish children were no longer welcome at the theater. Jews were not allowed, only allowed to shop for food in the afternoon hours, when the markets were just about empty or about to close. It became very difficult to obtain food. My mother, being a very resourceful person, had her connections on the black market. She would go to the shoemaker and come up with a chicken or to the dry cleaner with eggs or butter. One day, though, when she came back from a daily shopping trip, she burst into tears. She blurted out, all I could get today was some horse meat. Somehow, being the fantastic cook that she was, she made it taste good. The greatest humiliation, though, was to be compelled to wear the infamous yellow Jewish star with the word juif written, Jew in French. It was printed across it and had to be sewn on every garment. Children from the age of 6 had to wear it. On the first day that I and other Jewish classmates came to school wearing the star, the headmistress gathered the whole school together in the yard, called us near her, climbed up to the platform, and announced that any girl who as much as uttered a single insult or derogatory word towards us regarding this terrible badge that we were forced to wear, that girl would be severely punished. What a brave person she was. She could have been in a lot of trouble. This speech was quite effective within the school walls. The girls were kind, although distant, as they were probably warned by their parents not to be too friendly with a Jewish girl. However, as we left school every day, we had to run as fast as our legs could carry us, because the boys of the neighboring school came running after us, throwing rocks and calling us dirty Jew dogs and other equivalent insults. I would run crying into my house, angry and screaming at my mother. Why do we have to be Jewish? Why do we have to be different? This was my childish reaction to the situation. But I was just a child, did not understand fully. I just wanted to be like all the other children. My mother tried to soothe me and explained that this was temporary and that eventually all would be well. I was not quite convinced, and I do believe that neither was she. Around that time, as soon as my parents heard that they were rounding up all the young Jewish boys to send them to labor camp, they made arrangements for my brother, as well as my cousin, both teenagers, to leave Paris. They devised a unique way to get them out of Paris. My uncle, who was a tailor, sewed 2 naval uniforms, since uniformed young men usually did not have to show papers. I remember my mother sewing money into the hems of their jacket and their pants. She would have stuffed the whole chicken in there. She could have. They got away safely, leaving for parts unknown, which was quite disturbing to us. But we got word somehow later on, after they were refused entry into Switzerland, that's another story. They hooked up with the French forces of the resistance and were fighting the Nazis. And then a series of arrests began. Has anybody here read Sarah's Key? Yes. So you know that it is a true event, fictitious story based on a true event. When I read the book, a light bulb went on in my head. It was in July of 1942, and the Nazis ordered the arrest of thousands of Jewish children, women, and of Jewish men, women, and children who were rounded up and kept for days at the Veldi, a large bicycle arena. They were held without adequate food or water and terrible sanitary conditions. Finally, they were shipped to concentration camps. I remember that my father told us that we were to leave our home and stay at his factory for the weekend. I don't know how he knew to hide us. Perhaps he has some inside information from some good-hearted policeman. My father also brought some friends. We had quite a crowd hiding with us. My parents made me feel that we were going to a picnic. My mother picked back some delicious food. We slept on blankets, played games, and I was not at all afraid. After the weekend, we went back to our home, and some others were not so lucky. Shortly after, one evening, we heard a commotion in the apartment right below us. An elderly couple lived there. My mother and dad would be following her. There were 2 policemen telling these people to hurry up. My mother, feisty as can be, turned to the policeman and asked why these people were being arrested, what crime they had committed, and cried out in despair that they were old and diabetic and would not survive for too long without their medicine. The policeman became very angry with my mother for interfering. He turned to her and said, "Lady, you are not on the list tonight. You know, they have lists of people to be arrested. But if you don't shut your mouth in French vernacular, you and your little girl are coming with us." At this point, there was nothing we could do but to retreat back to our home, defeated but very sad. We knew a young couple, a beautiful couple. I remember her being so beautiful. They lived across the street and they were friends of my parents. They had a baby boy, 1 year old, a beautiful little baby. I used to play with him all the time. My father told me, I asked him why I hadn't seen these people for a long time. I missed the baby. And he kept evading my question until finally, after many times of asking him where they were, he told me what he learned. It seems that when the police came for them, the young mother resisted arrest, made a terrible scene, and they killed the baby right in front of their eyes. It was devastating. Another arrest which affected us personally was my aunt and uncle, my father's brother, whose son had left with my brother. They paid somebody who promised to get them across the border to the free zone. And that person led them right to the Nazis. There were unfortunately many unscrupulous people who preyed on innocent, desperate victims. And there were some who genuinely helped the Jews. You just had to know whom to trust. One day, shortly after, as I sat at my desk at school, I noticed that my friend Bert was absent. The teacher burst into tears, and she told us that Bert and her family had been arrested the night before. I was sick with grief. When I got home, my father kept reassuring me that we were safe. I trusted him. I never questioned his authority as a child. He seemed to know everything. He was quite a strong figure. I only found out much later on why he was so confident that we were safe from arrest. My brother told me. It seems that the Gestapo had visited him at his shop and requisitioned his factory to make fur coats for the German army. They were about to fight on the Russian front and needed some warm coats. He had no choice, of course, but he felt that as long as they needed him, our family would be safe. Shortly after, for some unknown reason to me, my mother kept me home from school. I found out later on why. The headmistress had contacted her and told her that she had secret address information that the Gestapo was coming to school to pick up all the Jewish children. They did this routinely throughout France. It was towards the end of the school year, and I didn't go back to school. My parents felt that I should leave Paris for my safety. We had very good Christian friends who lived in our building and who had adopted a little boy. This boy was adopted from their cousin, a poor widow with 6 children, who was a refugee herself from Lorraine, which is right near the German border. She was trying to escape from the Nazi occupation herself. Her oldest son had joined the RAF in London, and she and the other 4 children had sought refuge in the free zone of France in the Dordogne area. This boy, according to their agreement, was to spend every summer with his biological family. My mother begged them to take me along for the summer. This would give her time to try to convince my father to plan an escape. Our friend agreed to take me, but it was going to be tricky, and we had to plan my departure without arousing suspicion. Neighbors in those days were always watching you, some very anxious to report the Jews who were breaking the law, and thus were forced with the Nazis, who were the powerful winning side. Since we were not allowed to go out after dark, and the train for my departure was in the evening, the plan was for me to pretend that I was mailing a letter at the post office, which was right around the corner from our building. I often did this in view of the neighbors, without wearing the Jewish star, of course. And they didn't pay much attention to me because I always came my back. On that particular evening, I was to mail a letter and then run to the train station, which was maybe a couple of miles away, wait for the man and his son who would carry my suitcase and board the train with them. This was probably the most painful moment of my life, because I had to say goodbye to my parents, not knowing when or if I would ever see them again. I pleaded with them to come with me. My father said that he could not leave. I then asked my mother to come with me, and she told me that she could not leave my father, but reassured me that they were planning to join me very soon. My mother hugged me for a long time, and then uttered the words that have been with me all my life. She said them half in French, half in Yiddish, translated to, "There goes my beloved child. There goes my good luck. There goes my muzzle. We boarded the train and we had one more hurdle to surmount. We had to cross the border into the free zone of France. As you know, the Vichy government had made a deal with the Nazis that part of France towards the south would be made free of occupation. But eventually, the Nazis marched right through, ignoring the pact. At the border, two officers came on board, one French and one German, and asked to see the man's papers. He told us to be very quiet, and so we obeyed because we knew that this was very dangerous. Since children had no papers, he examined the man's papers, asked him who these children were and where we were going. The man answered without hesitation that we were his son and daughter, and that we were going to the stop to visit some relatives. They looked us up and down for a very long time as we kept a very straight face and finally left the cabin. We had lucked out. What a courageous man he was. If he had been found out transporting a Jewish child across the border, he would have been arrested on the spot or worse. We arrived in Piédu in the Dordogne, a quaint little village in a rural community with a real castle at the top of the hill. It was old and in ruins, but it still had a dungeon, which was quite a playground for all the children in the neighborhood, in the village. The family lived on the main street in a storefront, which consisted of one large room, kitchen, and back room. There was an outhouse, or a shack with a hole in the ground, which is a far cry from the luxurious bathroom we had in Paris. The conditions were very primitive. We had to wash in the kitchen, which we did not do too often. The girls had the front room, and Madame slept in the back with her two sons. She was a kindly looking lady, dressed in black as she was still in mourning, and had premature gray, which she wore in a bun. She looked very sad, but she did smile a lot at her little boy who had come back to her. There were two older girls who were very friendly to me, plus one teenage boy and a beautiful red-headed girl. She was about my age, but she developed quite an attitude when she saw me. She probably resented me for taking up much of the attention. We never really got close, just barely tolerated each other. They fed me well. I never went hungry. I was never too clean, but never wanting for food. I still remember the wonderful rabbit stew that Madame made. We ate a lot of rabbit as it was cheap and readily available. They immediately took me to the church, where the priest told me how welcome I was. He declared himself to be my protector, told me that I could sing in the choir, and to pick out a saint for whom I would bring flowers. What does a little Jewish girl know about saints? Well, I only knew one. I picked Joan of Arc, because that was the only one I knew. And I considered her to be brave and strong. I would pick flowers from the fields and place them at the foot of her statue. I sang in the choir. I did have a good little voice in those days, but could not take communion because I was not baptized. The mayor's daughter, I still remember her name, Janine, befriended me immediately. I was quite a novelty in this town. She looked me up and down, and said, I never met a Jew before, but you don't look any different. I then became the town mascot. 3 weeks after my arrival, I received a large package containing my winter clothes, books, favorite toys, and my beloved doll. There was a letter from the man who had brought me, in which he told me that my father could not write since he had broken his arm, and that my parents had to go into hiding because conditions in Paris had become very dangerous. I would not hear from them for a while, but he urged me to be brave and patient, and that I would get news soon. Needless to say, that was quite a shock to me. I was very upset. As much as everyone tried to comfort me, even the redhead was nice to me for once. I felt so alone and deserted without my family. The only comfort I had was to hug my dog and imagine that my bond would hold me tight. I could even smell her perfume on the dog. And I have a sneaky suspicion that she had saturated that dog with her perfume. I realized that I would stay Priever for a while, so I tried to adapt to the life. Me, the little city girl, became a real little peasant girl. I walked clogs. I learned to walk through the woods and pick mushrooms. I climbed up trees and picked cherries and apples. I learned to ride on my friend's bike. I played with snails and frogs. I learned to knit and went to church with the others. I prayed to God. I believed it was the same God and asked him to keep my parents and brothers safe. Luckily, my brother found out where I was and managed to visit me in Priever. As he said, he went through hell and fire, but he felt that he had to see his little sister. As soon as the priest saw my brother, he told him that I should be baptized in order to keep me safe. My brother told him that I was Jewish and that my parents would want me to stay Jewish. My brother visited me 3 times during my stay, and the priest approached him each time with the same request. I really believe that he was determined to save my soul. I was enrolled in a secular school. It was one large classroom comprised of several grades. I was in the advanced grades, and the headmistress was my teacher. She loved me as I was a very good student, and she was also very protective, as she knew of my circumstances. One day, as I was sitting at my desk near the window, I noticed a number of men in the yard, dressed in dark clothing and carrying guns. My teacher ran out to speak to them. When she came back, I asked her who these men were, and she replied, "Oh, these are just friends of mine," and changed the subject. Well, I found out later on that she was one of the heads of the French resistance, which was quite prevalent in our region. Actually, most people in the village were involved in the resistance. We often heard American planes dropping supplies in the fields. We had a very close call one day. There was a village not too far from ours, named Oradour-sur-Glane. This is documented in the history books, where a German officer had been killed by a resistance fighter. In retaliation, the Nazis shot all the men in the public square, gathered all the women and children in the church, and set it on fire. And I believe there were no survivors. That same regiment of Nazis were marching towards our town, and we guessed they were still angry. Our resistance fighters went from door to door, told us to pack a bag and food and head for the woods, where they would try to protect us. So we spent the night in the woods. In the morning, we were told that the Nazis had changed their course and were headed in a different direction. Lucky once more. We also witnessed events that no children should ever see. We witnessed the execution of traitors. We knew that these were held in the cemetery, so we would climb up the wall, even though we were not allowed. And we would watch as they shot the traitors who had betrayed their own comrades. Every time one was shot, we would shout with joy. This is hard to believe, but we even saw a father, one of the farmers that we knew, order the execution of his own son, who had betrayed a friend to the Nazis. You have to understand that the French, especially the country French, were very, very patriotic. The government, not so much, but the French people were very patriotic. Liberation finally came, and the whole village celebrated in the streets. We anxiously awaited some news of my parents, expecting them to come to me at any time. A couple of months later, my brother arrived. He could not get away sooner because after liberation, he had been put in charge of a German prison camp. In his charge were many Nazi officers, and although he said he never mistreated them, he told me of one incident where he told the officer to remove his beautiful new leather boots. My brother tried them on and said, "They fit perfectly. I will keep them. And I also want you to know that I am a Jew." What sweet justice that was. Well, he had his own very, very interesting story to tell. Upon his arrival, my brother sat me down and told me the sad news. My parents were never in hiding. They were arrested 2 weeks after I left Paris, were taken to Gerbosi, the French internment camp, and 10 days later were shipped to Auschwitz. After witnessing my emotional reaction, he told me that we were going back to Paris to stay with my one remaining uncle and aunt and good cousin, who had escaped by hiding in a convent. He told me that many people were returning from the camps. They were called displaced persons or DPs, and that we might be lucky to find them. So we went back to Paris. We went to live with my aunt and uncle. Their apartment had not been taken. We, on the other hand, had lost everything. Our apartment and furnishings were all taken away, as well as my father's business. We had nothing left except for some money, some jewelry, and photos that my parents had given our neighbors for safekeeping. We did recover one precious item. We knew that all pianos taken from the Jews were held in a warehouse, as they had no time to ship them to Germany. If we could identify your piano with proof, you could get it back. My aunts and cousins and I proceeded to the warehouse. We looked around and saw hundreds of the most beautiful pianos. Some looked very expensive, large grands, ornate, gilded. It was a dazzling sight. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted this small upright piano. I ran over to it, started to play and screamed out, "This is my piano." The man in charge said, "Are you sure?" I replied I was quite sure, because it had the same shaped ivory note, and it sounded just like mine. He asked me if I had any papers for proof. I told him that they had taken everything away from our home. How could I possibly prove it? I pointed out to him that I did not pick up one of the expensive pianos. I just wanted what was mine. He finally said that he believed me and that I could have it. My cousins were thrilled. They had never played the piano before, but they started taking lessons, and it was evident that they had also inherited the musical talent. Every day on my return from school, I would pass truckloads of DPs returning from the camp. I would run home in anticipation, hoping to find that my parents had returned. I even went to the then famous Rothschild synagogue, which changed the name since then, which was down the street from our apartment, and prayed to God, begging for my parents' return. Unfortunately, my prayers were never answered. I had to resign myself to the fact that they had perished at Auschwitz. One day, my brother went to our old apartment building to find out if they were in the news. There was a telegram from my aunt and uncle in America who wanted to know who was alive. He immediately responded that he and I were alive and living in Paris. My uncle wrote and said that they were the first in line at the American consulate to try to get us a visa to the United States. Soon after, we started receiving packages filled with all the wonderful American goods that we were so lacking. Since my aunt and uncle wanted us to come to the United States, we had to make a decision. My relatives and friends were also more than happy to have us stay with them. Actually, my brother was already employed and self-sufficient. But my aunt and friends said that they would keep me and educate me, and that I would be their third daughter. I know that she loved me very much. My brother and I felt that we belonged with my aunt in America. She was my mother's sister. She had no children. I remember years back when she told my mother that she couldn't have children. My mother replied, "My children are your children." Another prophecy that came true. My aunt had lost her entire family. We were the only ones left. So we decided that we would go to America. It took some months, but the papers finally came. I believe that I was given some priority because I was an orphan. I was to be examined by an American doctor who found me in perfect health. Then I was summoned to the American consulate where I was interviewed at length by an important looking official who examined my school papers, teacher recommendations, report cards, etc. He finally left his desk, came over to me, gave me a great big kiss on each cheek and said, "Rosette, I am proud to say, welcome to the United States of America. You'll be able to arrange passage whenever you wish." It was a different story with my brother. He had just turned 21, and the French government wanted him to serve in the French army. He argued that he had just served with the French forces of the resistance for the past few years. It took another year for them to accept that as legitimate service. And ironically enough, he received a pension from the French government for quite a few years, right? My brother took me to Havre, where I boarded a merchant marine ship. There were quite a few Jewish immigrants on board. I was the only orphan, and I was entrusted to the captain, who watched over me and made sure that I did not get seasick. It was a rough voyage, but every morning he would pick me up from the cabin that I shared with 5 other women, took me by the hand, and walked the deck with me. He said that was the only way to fight seasickness, and he was right. I never got sick, all the other people did. We arrived in New York 2 weeks later. Passing the Statue of Liberty was quite a beautiful sight. After we docked and I went down the flag, I saw my aunt and uncle who was screaming with joy. It was a very beautiful, emotional moment. Thus began my wonderful journey in America. It was April 19th, 1946. I was 13 and a half years old. I had left France as a little French girl with sad memories. I was not a budding American teenager. The first thing my uncle did was to buy me a piano and arrange for me to take lessons. My aunt also found me an English tutor, a retired high school principal, who upon hearing my story would not charge us. After studying with him the whole summer, I entered Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn and even got an A in English. In 1947, 1 year later, my brother arrived. As he walked off the ship, he was cradling a large object in his arm, wrapped in a blanket. It was the clock. I have no recollection of how he was able to recover it. Perhaps it was hidden at our neighbor's home. To me, it was a marvelous miracle. After having graced the home of my aunt, my brother, and my son, we donated it to the Holocaust Tolerance Center in Bedford, New York, where my son is a board member, of course. It will be housed in a room dedicated to the furnishing of Holocaust victims, complete with pictures and family history, and that makes me very happy. I made many friends when I arrived, went to parties, dated, much to my uncle's chagrin, as he was very protective. I attended and graduated from Brooklyn College, married, and had a beautiful family, 2 sons and a daughter. I am now blessed with 6 fabulous grandchildren, and I want to name them. My family is here. My 2 sons, Stephen Fishman, Robert Fishman, of course, my husband Peter, my two grandsons, Adam Fishman, Ben Fishman, and his wife Sarah. And of course, I forgot to mention my daughter-in-law, Lisa Fishman. And of course, the newest member of our family, my beautiful little great-grandchild, Miles William Fishman. 4 generations, the descendants of Shama and Dora. And I am so proud of them. My mother was right. My mother still prevailed. I am here to relate my tale. I sometimes shiver at the thought that had I been in Paris another 2 weeks, I would have been arrested and murdered along with my parents. That is the reason I became a docent at the Holocaust Museum in Naples, not only as a tribute to my parents, but also to educate people, especially young students, about the sad but fascinating part of World War II. This is especially important because they are the last generation who will see and hear a survivor who was a witness to the horrors of the Holocaust. My brother Bernard passed away 3 years ago. He was my hero, my protector. He shielded me from knowing my parents' fate while I was in hiding. Bernie, you will always be in my heart. Rest in peace. At this point, whenever I address groups of school children, I always like to leave them with a threefold message. First, value your family. You don't realize how much they mean to you until they are no longer with you. Second, appreciate the wonderful freedoms that you have in this great country. Free from persecution, free to speak up for your rights and the rights of others. And third, as I gaze upon their beautiful multiracial faces, respect your differences, as well as your cultural diversities. We are all different, color, religion, gender, but we are all of one race, and that is the glorious race, human race. I have devoted myself to promote tolerance and fight bigotry in any way that I can. If my story has touched your hearts, then I have accomplished my mission.
Here's a short video.
They gave their lives because they were Jewish.
I had no one. I said, if my mother was here, I wouldn't have to worry about it. She would come and take care of my children. And that's when you miss your mother the most. After you have your kids and you don't have your mother. Yeah.
Des yeux qui font baisser les miens, un rire qui se lève sur sa bouche, moi le corps les de l'homme qu'elle n'a pas final. Oh, il me voit dans ses bras,
Ah, c'est une arrêt.
le voilà qui il me dit de me
What you singing?
This is it?
And there was a post office around the corner where I mailed a letter, a famous letter.
Wait. Down this way, where is the train station that you went?
Oh, I don't think it exists anymore.
But you had to walk from the,
Actually, because I had run there. I walked there by myself at 10 years old.
Where was your home?
Really is hard.
Do you remember this?
Yes, I remember this coming here as a child.
What memory do you have?
Oh my God, you see my little farmhouse. With my mother and father. I lived in the neighborhood. It was the neighborhood park. Wow. Assassinated more than 500 of his children put into the Troisième and they don't think we should go on with this. I didn't know because I was no enough.
Nineteen oh three?
What did I do? Let me find out. My father changed the name to Lee because it was French.
He was born in 1895. I'm glad we're going to. It means so much.
Alan, Alan Mendel is our chairman of the board. This is from Alan. I can present that to you. You can shut this down.
If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer.
But you got more gifts, Mom. That's okay. Yolanda Zemek, who's my co-chair, is not here today, but she wanted you to have this as
Oh,
well.
that is beautiful. Thank
This is
you.
Yolanda.
That is so beautiful. Thank you.
We are going to do some Q&A. I do want to also talk about after the Q&A, or anyway, and I'll put it back on Zoom so folks on Zoom can ask some questions if you have, for our those indicators, Gail Castenholz, Susan Hershenhouse, Elise Freeman, Renee Kornfeld, and Helene Foreman will be across the hall for any of you who want to take the tour. Again, it's our jewel. We hope that you do take tours. So any questions for my mom? The interactive one.
There's always one question. There's always one question that the children always ask. Can you guess? What?
the dog.
Right. Well, I don't need the dog. I was too old to bring the dog to America. But luckily I have my son who made me look like a dog. Yes.
It's upon your strength and how you speak beautifully and thank you for doing this presentation coming from Florida. And you are a remarkable woman. You've gone through so much in your life and we are very lucky that you're
I am.
sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you so much. Well, I am a very lucky. My mother and father is instilled gave me a lot of love in the beginning of my life. I had them for 10 years, almost 11 years, and that means a lot. And as she said, I am a very muzzle liquor kid. I have this beautiful family, all these wonderful friends. So I am a very fortunate woman and a wonderful husband. I am very, very fortunate. And I thank my mother's spirit to this day to have given me all that.
Michael.
In the video, it says you didn't visit the park in 70 years.
Yeah.
Does that mean you didn't go back to France until then, or?
Oh, no, I had gone back several times, but that's the first time, it's the first time that I came with some of my children, they mentioned. They wanted to find their roots. Yeah,
And what was that experience like going first time and then going with your family?
it was bittersweet. Paris is a beautiful city, I'm sure a lot of you have been there. Very beautiful city. For me, it's bittersweet because there was a lot of pain there too. But I still love Paris. And I still have cousins in Paris. My twin cousins unfortunately passed away, but they have children and I see her daughter when I get there. Yeah. I go back, but I do love America. America is my country. Since I'm 14 years old, so this is my country and I love America.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Anybody else?
Another, you said your brother has another story. It sounds like he shared his story.
I did share it with Steven Spielberg. It's on record there if you want to access it. Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know how many were Jewish people, men who were part of the resistance. He was one of them. He and his cousin. Yes, and they fought and they did a lot of damage to the Nazis. Yeah, and he was a wonderful brother to me because he shielded me from all the pain that I would have had for a year and a half that I was in hiding. I didn't know anything. I kept hoping that my parents were alive. And he knew it all along. He was a wonderful brother. Yeah. He lived to 95, he lived to a ripe old age. And, I still miss him.
Any questions? Rob?
Rosette, were you ever in touch with the family that shielded you?
No. They themselves were refugees and they went back to Norway and it just lost touch. Unfortunately, I don't even remember their last name. I do not remember their name. Though there are things that you forget when you're a child.
You remember so much.
Remember a lot. There were things that are very vivid in my mind, and there was some that are blacked out. Yeah. The way it goes. Yeah, but they were very good to me. They really were. They saved my life. Can you imagine 2 weeks? The matter of 2 weeks. My mother used to, it was really my mother's idea to send me away.
They were very brave to do that.
You know, when you were a child, I don't know, I don't know if I was brave, I just did what I had to do, what I was told to do. I was a very obedient child. Yeah. I was a very quiet child, believe it or not, I'm not anymore, but I love you. Well, you're a very wonderful audience, thank you very much, yeah.
I mean, this man, I don't know his name. Hi. I think you might have meant that your mother was very brave. That your mother was very brave.
Oh, my God. Can you imagine,
No, that's.
we're all not parents, to send your child away to an unknown place, to strangers, give your child away to strangers, and many mothers did that. They gave away babies this age. I know a woman who, her mother gave her away when she was 6 months old. She doesn't even, she can't remember anything. She was raised by somebody else. She found her mother at the end. Her mother found her, but she was sent away at 6 months.
I
So,
mean, I think about the number of incredible people.
yes,
Who save their children.
that's right.
By sending them away, never knowing if they ever.
That's right.
Again. And as a parent, as many of you are.
Yeah.
I always think about that.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Could I have done that?
Well, that, as she said, there goes my model. Because I was her model. And she was sending me away, because she wanted to save my life. And my brother's life, of course. They sent him away. They were taking the boys first, then they do work camps. And work them to death. Yeah, so they saved both of us. That's why I'm this wonderful family now. My descendants, my legacy. Thank you, everybody.
Elise in the back of the room, Elise, is Elise, one of the docents. Susan, Elise, Renee, Helene, and Gail will be across the wall. For any of you who want to take a tour of the Holocaust Museum itself. Feel free to pick it up. And feeling behind the name of the nation. So thank you again. And have something, please.
Is it better in person?
It is. I mean, it was amazing. I saw